All right, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the school committee meeting to order on Wednesday, April 22nd at 5:30 p.m. All members are present. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to get a flag on the screen, I believe.
Yes, I'm trying to get it to share right now.
Okay, I pledge allegiance to the
flag
flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, thanks everybody for joining me. My school committee members of the administration, and all the others who have joined us for this meeting. Reminder, this is just our second Zoom meeting, so we're still learning as we go. We got some feedback last time, and we're trying to incorporate it this time. But in general, we welcome feedback from any members of the public that would like to make comments. Feel free to do so any way you can. You can certainly submit a comment in the chat section, and we'll look to address it as we go through the various topics on the agenda. Or is there another way that somebody could request to provide feedback, Sean?
Yes, Kelly, they can raise their hand.
Okay, so you can see a button to raise your hand, do that. And I'll make a check for a request for feedback at a couple of different points in case we miss any. Other than that, I think we can go ahead and get started. So first on our agenda is the consent agenda. So can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Okay, next on the agenda, we have old business. Doesn't really feel like old business right now, just because it's a carryover from the following meeting, or from the last meeting. We're going to get an update on just the distance learning activities, how that's going.
So while Michelle Fonseca brings up the PowerPoint, I'm just going to bide some time here. We want to congratulate everybody who's doing a fabulous job with the distance learning. Our students are engaged, our teachers have done a heavy lift to make this happen for us. Our principals have been working very hard, our IT department, it's all hands on deck, and that's what's great about Middletown. Everybody does put their best foot forward. So we're getting feedback from parents. We did a survey. I think Michelle will go through. We intend to do another survey with parents the end of this week too. So Michelle, you ready to move?
Yes. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of catch everybody up. We're finishing up week number 5 of distance learning. Every week it evolves a little bit. So started off in one place, and we just keep improving on our practices, getting feedback from our teachers, from our parents, from our students on how to make this most comfortable, manageable, balanced as we possibly can. Our commitment is to continue to work on that. So I don't know if you've all have seen the distance learning website, but it's something we built right at the beginning as a means to communicate with our families. It's used differently than it was used 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago, it was 4 or 5 weeks ago, it was the beginning of how we communicated with our teachers and our students and our families about learning. But now we have other platforms in place that also do that. So I just wanted to kind of take you there for a second so you could see when you enter the distance learning site, we have a lot of information here. This is where we post our calendars. This is where we post our communications to families. Our learning goals are all here. We also have a help button. If you press the help button, it takes you right to our help page where you can ask for help for technology, or maybe you need school supplies, or maybe you want to find out about our grab and go program. But that's all right here at our fingertips. And you can also click on a school. So if I click on Aquidneck right now, takes you to the Aquidneck page. Every school has its own page. You can see that Principal Bulk on this page gave you some reminders for week number 5. And then underneath that, she has all of her classes listed here. If you click on a class, it directs you to the first grade site so that you have all the teachers from first grade. You can click on a subject area. And these students, especially our younger students, are using these kinds of postings because it just kind of puts everything in one place. So if you look on like Monday's assignments for first grade, here they were. First grade on Monday, this is everything they were doing for writing and reading and math and social studies. And every grade looks a bit different. Some classes take you right to their Google Classroom, which is another platform we've put in place that's really easy for kids to use. Our younger grades take you to more something that kind of allows them to look at what they're doing in each subject for each day. But again, this is just a great tool for us to have and to update. We do update weekly to allow for our families to have a place to gather their information. We even have information on phys ed and art and music, and we do this again for all of the schools. If you slide down on the left-hand side, you can see Aquidneck and Forest and Gaudet and the high school. And like I said, sometimes when you go to here's the message here from Principal Pont. And then if you go to each of the grades, and Principal Pont has been updating this with reminders and updates, important information, APs, items. It's just packed with info. And then you could click on a subject area and brings you to, this is, for instance, 9th grade English. And what's nice is they have some reminders here, but they ask you to go to the Google Classroom, which O'Brien has set up for that class. So these are just some quick examples of what's going on our site. But I really want to thank all of our teachers and administrators for keeping the site really up to date. When you look around at other districts, not everybody has this. This is something that was time consuming, but is super helpful to people to navigate. And our goal really is to not need the site. We want to have platforms available where they don't have to visit the site as much. But right now, everything is right here for them. Even there's even guides to Google Classroom for parents. We have facts on this side that are updated and they're always live. So you can always see the most up-to-date facts. That's just a little tour of our distance learning site in case you haven't been a part of that yet. And the second thing I wanted to talk about was, it's in your status report, but it's, we sent out a survey week 1 of distance learning, and we'll be sending out another one at the end of this week. But since we haven't met since that survey went out, I just wanted to kind of give an update on that first survey. First of all, we had 621 responses from that survey, which was phenomenal. And really, you can look at some of these pictures just to see how often your child's teacher was making contact that first week. 60% of our teachers made contact 6 or more times with their students. This one asked for overall experience with at-home learning for week 1. And that 5 was the best score we could get. And we had a lot, 33% in the 5s, and we had 38% at 4. And 23 at 3. We're going to give this out again for week 5 just to see where we are. And then if you look down at learning site, how many people use the site? We had 90% of our population using the site. And again, week 1, we did heavily rely on our site for communication before our platforms were up and running. So 90% used, 91% used the site, and about 90% found that site useful. So it's all good feedback. Did your child seem engaged with online and offline assignments? We had, again, about 90% saying yes, they did. So this is all wonderful feedback for us the first week. And we're sending out another one. I think it'll go out by Friday. So we'll have more information for you when it comes to that. The next thing yeah, go ahead. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I thank you for showing us this. This is, I'm amazed at how much you guys were able to put together in such a short period of time. So it's nice that this is all accessible and in one place families can go, and especially for parents of multiple children at different schools who are probably having trouble balancing the different or figuring out what different children need. So keeping it all together, I think is helpful at this point. And I imagine, I'm just trying to think about what the responses to the next survey might be, just based on what I've heard anecdotally. And I think while there are a lot of things that we've figured out and made run more smoothly over time, I think there are probably also some cases of parents who perhaps, or students who maybe have given up a little bit on distance learning in the first few weeks. So what are we doing to try to re-engage kids or families that maybe found, the kinks that we were working out in the first week or so and to be too challenging and have kind of disengaged?
Well, I mean, I think our overall goal since week one has been engagement and how do we connect to our students. And as the weeks progress, that's actually also changing into how do we sustain the efforts of our students, because this gets hard. This gets hard to do. And I think even during the first week, everyone was really excited at something different. But we know that the most important thing is that we have students that are engaged and that participate in the distance learning. That's what we want. And we monitor daily students' participation. So if we have students sort of falling off, not participating, we have a team that actually looks at that data every day and starts to outreach families and say, I noticed so-and-so wasn't engaged today. What's going on and what's happening? How can we support you? So there's been a lot of contact with families. And then sometimes we've done everything we can to support technology. We've given out over 800 devices. We've given out 50 hotspots to support families, but we still have some families, especially our multilingual families, that are experiencing trouble with getting online. And we've delivered packets to them. We've outreached them by dropping things off at their homes. So we're trying to do everything we can to sustain this and also balance it. So for one student, it might feel really balanced, while for another student, it feels like maybe too much work. And for another student, it might not be enough work. So we've had our teachers ask our kids, what is it too much? Is it not enough? Is it just right? And those are some of the questions we'll be adding to the survey this week. So talking more about workload and more about how kids are doing balancing this learning.
Well, if you ask the high school students if it's not enough, I'm not quite sure either.
They'll all say it's too much. But,
They'll definitely tell you it's too much, but they won't tell you it's not enough. I want to comment on, as a parent of a high school student, it is fantastic that every Monday morning, Mrs. Pont calls at 7:45, making sure that we remind our students to be up and sitting in front of their computer for attendance at 8 o'clock in their first class. So, and the teachers have set up the remind for their cell phones for texts and things like that. So that's been very helpful as a parent. And I think maybe, I don't know if everybody's hooked up to that, but maybe that's something, Michelle, that just to make sure that parents are aware that remind is available for them and that they can get connected even more so with their cell phones, and that they know the assignments. Like teachers text the assignments. So parents know exactly what to expect for what their students are supposed to be doing for homework assignments.
We have put a lot of different layers of outreach in place since the first week. Most of the younger grades are using Seesaw, which is a way that parents get responses right through an app on their phone. Other grades are using things called Blooms or Remind. We have grades 3 and up all using Google Classroom or OneNote. Those are also ways that they're given reminders about what assignments are due. We're using the Zoom platform and we're using Google Meets. So we have that live face-to-face time for teachers, which kind of takes me into the next part. I don't want to take up too much time, but we did outline what we expect of teachers because we wanted to be clear of what we wanted all students to receive. So this is a document that we've been working on. So for instance, in the pre-K through 3, what do we want our teachers to be doing during distance learning? And just some examples, we want to offer daily face-to-face contact with Meet or Zoom. We want to post meaningful activities at the at-home site. We want to use Seesaw, what we're just speaking about, to communicate with families and allow for sharing of work. We have directions here for co-curricular teachers and L teachers, intervention specialists. We're asking teachers to hold small group meetings and lessons for individual needs. We have directions how to take attendance, because we know taking attendance is important. We report that on a daily basis to the state. And we also have just different ideas about how grading is going to be done. And I'm going to take you into that next. But pre-K to 3 has a set. We have a set for grade 4 Learning Academy. We have a set for 5 through 8. And then we have a set for 9 through 12. And by establishing these expectations for teachers, we know that we have a better handle that kids are experiencing similar distance learning activities and contact and communication. So although one class might be using Remind, another class could be using a different app, but overall they're using something to communicate.
That's great.
And I also will say what's been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, is the fact that our teachers, most of our teachers were not using these platforms 5 weeks ago. Many people had not used Meet or Zoom, and many people had not set up Google Classrooms or done anything on a Google site before. But what I will say is we have had an incredible amount of professional development for teachers. And just last Friday alone, I think you remember that Friday was a professional development day for teachers and a catch-up day for students. And on that Friday, we had over 300 seats filled in our professional development that we held online. And it was all held by our own teachers. Our teachers volunteered to train other teachers. We had ways that our teachers could sign up. And then after they signed up, they attended about an hour-long session. And we had about 300 spots filled between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. So it just says a lot for how we're supporting each other through this and how much learning our teachers are doing to support students. It's absolutely amazing at the efforts we've had from teachers. Some teachers who had not felt comfortable with technology at all before are now doing things we could only have dreamed of. So, you know, there's always a silver lining in a lot of things that happen, and this has been one of them. The fact that we've catapulted into some technology skills that we really can, that really can benefit our kids. So we're really proud of our teachers for that.
The other piece is our principals, all of our principals send a morning call every Monday to kind of charge up the group, you know, and to ensure that our students are, will be attending and the expectations for the week. So that's kind of a personal touch that we all agreed to at the very beginning of this.
I think that's great. And it keeps us as parents on track to making sure our students are up, sitting in front of the computer. They can still be in their PJs, of course, but you know, they're up and functioning. And I think that's a really good, as you said, Mrs. Craig, a personal touch to it for that reaching out, that verbal contact.
The other piece to sustain the motivation that Kelly asked is many of our schools are doing a spirit week in between. Like this week, I know Forest Avenue, every day there was a spirit, a theme for the day. So when the teachers met their classrooms, they emphasized today was military child, I believe. So, you know, our military children were recognized. So we continue to take a look at how we are going to sustain the motivation and the enthusiasm by little things like that, to infuse little things like that into our classrooms. One thing that's been happening is that teachers have been having lunch bunches with their classrooms. So they'll meet again and just have lunch with their class. And the students can engage. There's teachers who are doing parent conferences. So great things are really happening.
Thank you.
And the last thing I just wanted to talk about was grading. We started talking about what we were going to do about grading a couple weeks ago with our teachers. The first thing we did was a teacher survey. We hadn't received any guidance from RIDE about grading until Friday, but it actually went along with what we've been talking about here in Middletown. So I kind of want to walk you through a little bit about where we are with grading. Let me just take you to the right page.
And this is an action item later on. So we're prepping you now for that action item. You'd be voting on a K through 8 alternate grading proposal.
So the first thing I want to say is that our alternate grading proposal does not mean that we're not going to be standards-based teaching. So we are still using our standards to drive instruction, and our goal is going to be to identify power standards and provide students with clear feedback related to those standards. But this alternate form of grading really allows us to look at students.
Hi, something's wrong with the internet and it just froze. Can you come home?
Can you go on mute?
Oh, there we go. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay. I think Liana might be having trouble with her internet. Okay, so what I was saying here is that the alternative form of grading allows for students to kind of be measured about their attitude towards learning rather as an end than a means. And the way that we support that really, like RIDE is telling us, they're encouraging our districts to consider moving towards a pass, no pass. In Middletown, we did not want to use the word fail. We did not want to use the word no pass. We did not want to use credit, no credit. We just wanted to support our kids through this distance learning and have some clear criteria so we could score them. So let me just show you, I think you might have seen this in your packet. But one of the things we've talked about is scoring our K through 8 students if they've met the distance learning expectations, if they've partially met the distance learning expectations, or if we've been unable to give them a distance learning grade. And just to take that a little bit deeper, the M signifies that the student met the learning objectives presented during distance learning. And the criteria for that is that they've participated and engaged in distance learning with consistency. The student work reflects applied teacher feedback instruction. And again, that feedback and that instruction would be standards-based. So we're not changing our instruction. And the student's effort and integrity is evident in the work. So that's the criteria for an M. And then each of our grade levels has started to work on what this looks like in their grade level. So they're starting to fill these out. And this is what we would be communicating to students and families so they could understand that, yes, this isn't exactly the same as what we're doing in school, but what we're doing is super important. And we'd like to make sure that our students are highly engaged and successful with the work. And that's how we're going to be grading them. So the P really talks about students maybe not consistently engaging in distance learning. Their work can reflect some student effort, but overall, they haven't fully met the expectation. And then a U would be that they have not participated or engaged in distance learning activities, and there may have been little to no student work to assess. And we don't want to see our kids in that level. We definitely want to see our kids as an M or a P in distance learning, and really want to see everybody, to ensure success, everybody in this area right here. So this is our proposal for grades K through 8. And I know later on this in the meeting, you'll be voting on this. Are there any questions about the K to 8, or did you want to do those questions later on, Rosemary?
Whatever the chair and the school committee wish.
I think now. So I guess that if a student isn't engaging and has disengaged, doesn't come back, isn't attending, that is where you'd end up in the U section. And then if a student is engaged and has attended all online sessions, completing all the work, but hasn't either grasped the material, or maybe there's errors and something that we would normally say hasn't met the standard but has been engaged, would that be an M or a P?
That would actually be an M.
Okay.
So here's the difference. If we've seen them show that they're applying teacher feedback towards the standard, they're showing consistent effort, they have integrity in their work, and they've engaged with consistency, they can be in M. This evens the playing ground a little bit for students,
Take it off.
especially
So people
students that
don't see.
receive supports in
Which
school that may not be available online. Maybe this is a whole different way of learning for a first grader, a second grader. Especially for the younger kids and even the middle school. It really allows for us to work on how hard they're working and their attitude towards learning. That's what we want to tell parents how they did during distance learning.
Okay.
So that's why we want every kid to be in an M. We want every student to succeed with our distance learning.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I have a question. I like this grading system. I think it's similar to what a lot of colleges are doing. They're finishing off their semesters with, some students are doing a pass-fail situation and keeping their GPAs from prior semesters. But I do have a question in regards to this. If the students are in a P or even in the M, let's say they're in the M, but they're not fully grasping the concept, are we going to be proactive and set up a program, a ramp-up type program to assist them when we do come back to school, hopefully in the fall?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a great question. I think it's what's on the minds of many of us. We hope that our distance learning for all grades, K to 12, is as robust and rigorous as we possibly can make it. But we also look at the circumstances that we're all in, and we understand that a lot of our kids might not be where we want them to be at the end of the year. We need to look at that carefully, and we need to provide practice, additional work, additional instruction for these students, whether it be in a summer program, whether it be in a future distance learning summer program, or whether it be in our schools. We have not received full guidance on what's going on in our buildings for the next few months. But as we think about opening our buildings, one of the first things we need to start thinking about academically is how we ramp up for our students. And that's something that's been on our mind all the time. So this is a way to sort of give parents an outlook on how they've done during this distance learning timeline. But we also have other assessments that show how they do in relation to standards. And those will be given, and then we have to look at gaps, and we have to look at how to close those gaps. There's no doubt on that.
So Michelle, there's also a question in the chat section from Counselor Terry Flynn that I wanted to see if we could address. So the question is, will the assessment start date using this new criteria be after the criteria has been published? Because using it for the first 5 weeks might not be fair. I mean, I have some thoughts, but I'll let you address that first.
Yeah, so the teachers have been working on this criteria. We're not 5 weeks into trimester 3. So trimester 3, trimester 3 is our last trimester of K to 8, and it's just really begun. So,
Okay, so what do you want me to say?
the first few weeks of distance learning, we were actually still in finishing up trimester 2. And we did that with our regular standards-based grading. And we gave out report cards, and we finished that up. But now we're working into trimester 3. If you approve this tonight, this is something we're ready to roll out to parents and students right this week, so that they'd have a clear expectation of what's expected from here on out. But yes, so if they have not engaged up to this point, but start engaging and start showing consistency and giving their best efforts, we want to see them get to that M. We do. But that's something that we need to see them work on from here until the end of the year for sure. But teachers have been keeping track of how kids are doing. And they've also been telling their students, listen, this counts as school. This is school. We expect you to engage. We expect you to turn in your assignments. We expect you to make sure that you're showing up for our meetings. So the expectations have been out there. It just makes it a little bit clearer. I hope that addresses that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it does. And that was sort of my thinking too, is that if it wouldn't be fair to say well, you didn't engage the first 2 weeks, so by default, the best you could do is a P. But I think we want to take the best of what we see from the students from now till the end of the year. And so if they if, let's just say, you know, as an extreme example, they haven't been engaging the last 2 weeks and now they know these are the rules and they jump in, fine, right? I mean, that they could still get the M, I'd say.
Yeah, and I spoke to a teacher last week and she said to me, Mrs. Fonska, I have 10 P's in my class right now and I can't wait to show them this because I know they're going to want to be M's. I know they're going to want it. I know they're going to want to get there. So it's going to push them a little harder. And I said, that's great. That's great news.
Right.
We shared this idea with quite a few people, teachers beforehand. They liked this much better than the pass-fail version. They thought this gave a little bit more detail and they felt about it.
And you know, the overall message I get from it is just show up and try is kind of what we're hoping that they'll do, right? Show up and put the effort in and, you know, and then, thank you, Terry. She said, yeah, did it address the question and then in feedback that the rubric is clear to parents for reinforcement to the students. So I agree. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. And beyond just showing up and trying, I think what we're really saying here is that they have to use the applied teacher feedback to make what they're doing better. So I think this sentence here is really important. They have to do something about the feedback to push themselves forward. And that's a big component of the M as well.
And that's why we have that other column. What does it look like? So we want to have agreement and calibrate what it looks like for every grade level. And that's what our teachers are doing now.
So if you're good with the K to 8, I could just talk briefly about 9 to 12 and where we are there. Okay. So
upgrade router.
different from K to 8. K to 8 is in trimesters and 9 to 12 is in quarters. So 9 to 12 just finished quarter 3 and they're moving to quarter 4. So they will be planning to keep their regular scores for quarter 4, scoring practices, grading practices. However, to kind of make things representative of the student learning during this extraordinary time, they'll be adjusting their grading plan as follows. They're planning on changing the percentages of the values. Right now, what you usually see is 20, 20, 20, 20 for the quarters, and then 10 and 10 for the exams. The proposal on the table is really to have each quarter be 25% for 1, 2, and 3, and then quarter 4 to be 15% weight. And that final exams will not be given during distance learning. If you have questions about this too.
Why would we not give take-home exams for the high school kids?
Well, I'm gonna have Mrs. Pont jump in because I know she's been working closely with her teachers. Is it possible to have her answer to that? And I know she was working with the directors as well.
I think so. Can we enable her to respond, Sean?
Yeah, I just turned her mic on.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I can hear you.
Okay, so the thinking was that, the security of the test and also the validity of the test was something that they questioned, because you are giving it in an environment that you are not monitoring and things like that. So they felt as though if they did a better job of just quality assessments throughout the fourth quarter, that we wouldn't need to do the end of the year exam.
So I guess I would say that's fine. Okay, I'll accept that. But I really think it's important to make sure that if you're not going to do exams, it would be no different than a take-home exam. So I get the question of validity, but if students are having to type or write information, then they're gaining something from that. So if they're having to type it into the computer and submit it, every time students write, at least this is what I always learned when I was growing up, the more you write it down, the more you retain the information. So I just think it's important that if they're not going to do finals, that they're having written assignments or that they are submitting some kind of hands-on submission. I don't know how to describe it because it's handwritten typed in, whatever, submitted, that it's showing some visual work. And I just feel that that's critical for retention of information.
So are you, just to clarify, are you talking about assignments that are passed in by students and then assessed by teachers?
Yes, I mean, if they're not going to do it as a final exam and they're going to do assignments throughout this last quarter, then those assignments need to be very articulated by the students so that the information is being demonstrated, that the students are retaining information and gaining a skill set. So if you're not going to do finals, I understand that, but I really feel it's critical that the teachers need to make sure those assignments are detailed and specific, and the students are required to submit a substantial amount of information over the course of the quarter.
Well, here's what's going to happen. Remember, our fourth quarter is going to be a little bit shorter because our third quarter ran a little bit longer. The other thing that happens is not doing final exams allows us more instructional days. And I think that the students on a regular basis are doing a lot of writing and handing in assignments and essays regular basis with their teachers. So I don't think by not doing a final that it's going to harm anybody.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, I don't have enough experience with all the other teachers. I know I'm only dealing with the 6 that my daughter has, but I just think it's important that if they're not going to do that, then we need to make sure that they're doing written assignments throughout the fourth quarter and submitting that, demonstrating their knowledge of the content.
Yeah, they will be.
Expectation is certainly that there's assignments given from every subject area in all grades. So
Okay.
that's certainly an expectation that student assignments are given, and then that feedback is given back to students, even in first grade. So that's definitely a piece of it. We also want to think about the social emotional component that many of our students are going through this distance learning, and try to keep the stress level to a good place and balance things for them. This is something we've all never gone through before. So I think that the high schools, especially in our area, we've been talking to local high schools that are thinking along the same path as this, just to kind of understand this extraordinary circumstance and the pressure that's been put on students, and how we can balance that a little bit with the percentages and the expectations. But again, we're not taking down our standards, and we're not telling them they don't have to do assignments. We still have expectations of high quality student work. It's just another way to kind of balance it a little bit in this situation.
No, I understand that.
I also think one of the things that went into our thinking about the marking periods was, remember, we don't have in-person instruction going on a daily basis like we normally would. So I think that the percentages are reflective of the lack of in-person contact that we have or will have in the fourth quarter. And third quarter was almost over, just extended a little bit longer to let kids kind of get acclimated to the distance learning, and then the fourth. But, there were a lot of, not all kids learn well on a computer. And,
No, I know.
But I think a lot of the teachers through their Google Classrooms had high expectations for kids still with their learning. I know there's kids still doing essays because they email me and tell me what they're doing. I saw emails to all grade levels. So I don't think we're going to lose anything by not giving end of the year exams, because if anything, that would be 5 days that would be taken out to do those exams where we can actually do some hands-on learning.
No, that's a very valid point in itself. I completely agree with that. Again, don't misunderstand. I'm not trying to put stress on students. I know that this is a whole different world for them. That is the last thing I want is that social emotional distress. But I just also want to make sure that with this time period from March 13th to the potential of September 5th, that we're not, we already know that there's a loss of information for students over a 10-week summer. I just want to make sure that we're not extending that time period, and that we're still want to have some rigor in the program without stressing anybody out, obviously.
I mean, I think that's something that you just nailed it there with how do you put forth the rigor but still balance the expectations, and that's been our biggest challenge, but something that's always on our mind. So we don't want to take down those expectations too much, right? But we also don't want to give the kids such a stressful environment. We want to make sure we can balance it because we're not physically with them every day.
Right.
And it's so difficult to balance that. But by talking to our kids and connecting with them as much as possible. I mean, I know many teachers are, and I credit them highly, they're talking to kids well into the evening through emails, through text messages, through Google Meets, just so they can connect with them and say, you know, how do we move you forward? And I think they're really individualizing too. They're kind of meeting kids where they are and trying to bring them forward. And ultimately, that's what we want to make sure happens here. We want to make sure that kids continue to grow and learn during this time. Is the rate a little slower? It could be. But we want to make sure it happens and we want to keep that momentum going. And that's not easy, but it's something we are committed to thoroughly. Absolutely.
Many
I think
of them
that
are having one-on-one meetings or small group meetings with students that are struggling or that they have concerns with too.
I think the district is doing an amazing job. The only last thing I would put out there for some food for thought is I know that you're busy working on the current curriculum, but just maybe somebody could start thinking about some suggestions for summer activities of, you know, since the students do have the computers, IXL, you know, whatever other computerized reading programs they're using now, could we ensure that we can retain those subscriptions so that students can continue that learning throughout the summer if they so choose?
100%.
And then obviously some
Absolutely.
summer reading activities that the students could do.
We have prepared what it would look like if we're in school. We were already working on that in January and February. So we have an in-school summer program, you know, probably halfway planned and ready to roll very quickly if that's what we end up doing. But we also have some backups for online learning. One of them is a new program called Edmentum that will offer students a great amount of support online. And then we have Discovery Education, which was offered free through the Department of Education, Rhode Island Department of Education. And that will be open to our students as well as all of our online tools that we subscribe to. So we are certainly thinking of that. We've got to do something over the summer. So it's on our minds for sure.
I have one more question on the grading scheme. So would there be any flexibility given to teachers with this percentage allotment if students really thriving at the end of the year, maybe struggled a little bit earlier in the year, and now we're putting additional weight on that? You know, maybe it's like I'm thinking, especially for some of the freshmen, maybe it was a transition to high school. Maybe they got off on a slower foot in quarter one, and now we've increased the weight of that on their final grade. So if a student has really improved throughout the year and is thriving as the year has gone on, could that weighting be, could the end of the year be more heavily weighted, that fourth quarter instead, if it benefits the student?
I think I'll let Mrs. Pont answer to that. I think this is sort of what we had set up for year-long courses. But with that said, I know Mrs. Pont has sent out guidance to teachers about making sure we're really understanding how students are doing and giving a fair grade. So Mrs. Pont, did you want to jump in?
Sure. So one of the things with this grading scheme is it's totally in line with what we normally do. Normally our first quarter is 20%, second quarter is 20%, mid-year exam always 10%. Quarter 3 and 4, like you said before, Michelle, are all 20%. And then we had the end of the year exam, which was 10, which gives you the total final percentage of the 100%. So if a student struggled a little bit in the first quarter, one of the things that the teachers were talking about was they want to give students an opportunity to do some credit recovery, and then they would work individually with those students, and that would allow them to kind of recover some of what may have gone wrong when they first came to the year, or whatever it might have been. It could have been a large number of things that caused somebody not to do well for a quarter. So we are offering that to do credit recovery.
Okay. I think
And
that
then
makes
the
sense.
other thing, I see there's a question from Terry Flynn about guidance on the impact of the grading proposal. It doesn't really have any impact on them at all, because it's very similar to what you already see. So one of the things and the reasons why we stayed with grades were NCAA requirements, and the way that they figure grades, that NCAA was saying that they were going to interpret pass fails in a way that was relative to a GPA, and we just wanted to stay tried and true to our grades. So then because we have quite a few students that are moving on to colleges and going to be participating in sports and other activities, and so it'll keep everything in a line.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for thinking about that.
Yeah.
There was one other question. Are we proposing to use midterm/final to be integrated into grades when they were not used in grade calculation before? I think the answer to that is that they were included.
They always were. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the students would have known.
It's been that way all along.
So just to give, I'm going to let Terry, if you have a follow-up question, I'll allow you to talk if you want to, Terry. So you should be able to unmute yourself if you want to follow up.
Okay, did I unmute properly?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, excellent, thank you. Great job, you guys. Outstanding what you're doing out there. I am so engaged with observing the successes. I hope some of it can be carried on to future education.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Kelly?
Yes. I see you back, Lee.
Okay, thank you. Just had to restart it again. My question to Michelle is, okay, so they're going to be out for 6 months. Can they master all of their skills within that time? Because we won't be back until, I assume, September. And that's a long time for them to be out and then try to start again in the next grade. So what are you going to do?
So, yeah, we know this is not optimal being out all this time. I don't think nobody would have chosen this situation, but
Right.
we are doing everything we can to support them through this. And then we'll have to put even more ramp ups in place when we get back to school. But we also can put some of those ramp ups in place right now and throughout the summer for students that we know need it. So we're not giving up. We're pushing through and doing everything we can. We know that we don't want to have anybody falling behind, but realistically, we do know that we're going to have students who need the ramp ups and supports. And unfortunately, I will need to say that it will cost us some money for that.
Right.
So, unfortunately, we're not in a great place with the budget, and I fear that the last thing you want to do is get rid of interventionists. If anything, I'd be recommending that we bring on more interventionists, more reading specialists, more math coaches in order to close this gap. It's going to be crucial to make sure we're doing everything we can for these students, support-wise. It's just going to be crucial in the next, 6 months, year, 2 years. It's just going to we got to make sure that we do everything we can.
Right.
I do think Rhode Island has led the charge with distance learning. I'm so impressed in talking to many of my college roommates that live around the country when they tell me what their children are doing versus what we're doing here in Rhode Island. I think we should be highly impressed with our teachers and what Rhode Island has done in the last few weeks. However, nothing can replace being in a classroom for 6 hours a day with a highly qualified teacher. And we need to think about that as we move forward.
As we go on.
I want to say my grandchildren who live in other states want to tap into our distance learning. They've been on our website. So.
Okay.
I have 2 questions for Michelle. This suspension of the final exams is for this year. If we go back to normal next year, we'll be back to regular final exams. The other thing, if this type of learning goes on, maybe you could get with other schools and you give final exams over the computers on the same day at the same hour and have different ones for people who do makeup. But this is only if this thing goes on forever. Now, the other problem is in September. Labor Day is September 7th or 8th. So going back to school, we won't be going back to school if we wait until after Labor Day until the 8th or the 9th of September.
Well, I think we already did the calendar and we're starting before Labor Day this year.
Oh, are we? Okay, great.
It's so late. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And again, we'll do everything we can to get back to normal as best we can. You know, these right now are temporary changes due to distance learning. But also as the weeks go on and we discover more and more things we can do, you're right, maybe distance learning, if it were to continue, would look even better and different in the future. I mean, we're making improvements on a daily basis. We really are. And those improvements are coming right from our teachers. Somebody will say, hey, guess what I figured out how to do? Can I show others? And it just catches on. So again, while I conclude here, I just need to say thank you to our educators in Middletown. They are our heroes. They are doing the work and they are doing it well. So we're super proud of them.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for adding that at the end. Agree.
Kelly,
Okay. Yes.
I have another question.
Yeah.
How much, Michelle, how much do you think we might need for summer work? Or, you know, because I look at this long term and I still want the students to master their work that they have been missing for these few months.
So I think that's something we need to work on with Rosemary and Cindy and I. I'm just kind of doing a projection for you and I'm sure we could do that. But some of the things I even start to think about is what does that look like first? So say we have social distancing, but we're allowed to go to summer school. But we have to keep classes super small. We can't put a lot of kids on a bus. You know, they all have to sit one per, maybe they have to sit in one seat and only one person. So we're going to need more busing than usual. We're going to need more teachers than usual. So I think we need a little time to brainstorm that and figure it out. But there is a cost that certainly comes with all of this. I've been thinking about what our schools would look like social distancing. I think we all have. And that is certainly going to be, I think it's doable, but I think it's a challenge. And it might be as soon as this summer that we have to, you know, figure that out, or in June. I don't know. We're all waiting for the governor to kind of give us her next steps. But we certainly have to kind of put the pencil to paper and figure out the cost. Would you agree, Cindy?
But there's something that's very important that it has to be emphasized here, and you did say it, Michelle. If this happens and we are allowed to gradually open the economy and be able to offer summer school to our students in person, and we're doing that smaller classes and smaller, the social distancing, the cost is definitely going to go up significantly. Extra buses, extra teachers, and using more space in the school requires more cleaning. I mean, don't forget to add that into your calculations. Absolutely. That if you're going to be using 15 extra classrooms instead of 7 classrooms, you know, that's time for custodians to get out there and do their cleaning.
And Dave Fons brought up to me, I think just today, the level of cleaning. I don't want to say, you know, we don't clean well enough every day. We do, but
not like that.
The level of cleaning is going to have a cost to it as well.
Absolutely. And if we're going to be doing summer programs that involve food and lunch, and, you know, then the cost is even higher because you're disinfecting even more so. I just think it's very important that we keep that information of the potential significant increases to support social distancing for safety reasons, but to support our students educationally. Those dollars are going to be significant. And I am only, and I also want to add, I just got off the phone after an hour phone call today with an organization upstate regarding early childhood. And the social distancing in a toddler room, in a 3-year-old room.
Right.
You know, how are we going to work this out? Don't go play next to each other. You have to stay 6 feet apart. Yeah, it's not going to happen.
You're gonna have a lot of playpens, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
So I,
a
you
lot
know,
to think about.
talking on that level that I deal with on a day-to-day basis is different, obviously, but it's important that the town knows that in order to keep up with and support these students and keep the social distancing for safety reasons, there's going to be a very large price tag on that we've never had before.
And then what happens? Do we have a plan B if the town council says no to it, that we don't have the money, or the state doesn't have the money?
But I think,
what do we do?
I think that there will be more federal support. I think those dollars are not going to be cut off. We're not going to be cut off at the knees. Is it going to be a challenge? Yes. But I do believe that, you know, another stimulus package is going to have to come out in order to be specific for education at some point.
Education.
So we'll have to wait and see, but I just want to make sure that we keep that conversation public about the social distancing and what that cost will be in order to be able to still sustain and grow our educational system, you know.
Right. So what would happen if even in September, we have to keep the distance and we have to wear masks for other children? I mean, that's a cost.
Mhm.
And then what do we do?
I mean, do
Where
you
do we get those dollars?
I know,
What
do
can
you,
we do now to make sure that we get those dollars in case, just in case?
I think
We
it's
won't get 'em
having
just-
the conversations like we're having now. And as Teresa said, keeping those conversations going and discussing it with our town leadership
Yeah.
and community at large.
Right.
Right.
And also at the state level, you know, our senators and legislators.
Right.
And the thing is, this isn't going to be a Middletown issue. So this isn't going to be just Middletown going through this process. So it's not like we are going out fighting for the dollars on our own. It's not an individual district issue. It's going to be a challenge for the entire state and the entire, actually, Massachusetts is going to be going through this too. So
Right.
I know we need to move on.
My concern isn't it just that it's a Middletown issue so much as it's not just a school issue either. There are additional costs in other departments as well. So it's not like, you know, I'm just putting myself in a town councilor's shoes saying, yes, there's an emergency pandemic affecting the schools with additional costs, but I have to imagine it's impacting the police department. You know, they're purchasing additional PPE, things like that.
And the
Fire department as well. And
Right.
with folks out if they have to quarantine and staffing levels and all of that. It's just, that's my bigger concern is even with the best of intentions that we're competing for resources at every level. Just like, you know, the governor says we're competing with our states to get some of the equipment locally. We're going to be competing with other towns and even with departments in town to make sure that everybody, and I don't know, right? I mean, nobody knows how much funding is going to be made available for this. So you're right. I think all we can do on this front is keep the conversation going. People should understand where we're coming from, where our concerns and these additional costs are coming from. And as we know more, we can make more informed decisions and have more informed conversations.
So should we form a committee?
No,
Group?
not right now. I mean, I don't think we can do anything about it until we know more what the governor's going to do. I mean, we kind of have to wait for some guidance and guide it. Once she starts to open the economy slowly, there's going to be some very specific guidelines. So what if we can't do anything once she sets those guidelines? If she says there's 10 kids in a classroom, then that's the guidelines we have to follow. So we're not going to have much of a choice of it.
Right, but we could start the conversation and come up with different plans or what are some pros and cons to each of the problems. I'd rather start now than wait, and you know, I like to be prepared for different scenarios.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe Rosemary, I don't know what kind of conversations you're having with Sean, if you feel like we're at a point yet where we could start those conversations or if we're still just kind of?
No, we have conversations almost daily. Cindy is preparing data to submit to the town about our expenses thus far with the COVID-19. We will be submitting them to the town. They'll submit them to the state. I think in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll know more information. And then that's when we really have to have those hard conversations about how we're all going to survive in this town with issues. So,
and Rosemary, I would add to that over the next few weeks, hopefully and not months, we'll be hearing more from the state about those new monies.
exactly.
Both
Yes.
the ESSERF monies and what that's going to mean for schools and what restrictions are going to be placed, how it can be used, all of that. So, but I did talk to someone at the state today, and they're going to be releasing that information bit by bit because they're still gathering the information themselves.
Which monies were you talking about, Cindy? You call it
The
Easter?
new federal money, the ESSERF, it's under the Elementary and Secondary Act, but it's what people are calling stimulus money or the READ money, or it's coming by a lot of names, but it's really the same pot of money, which is worth for K through 12 education, it's worth about 46.3 million. And they're saying that the distribution is based on our Title I funding allocation. But how they're looking at all sorts of ways to provide some relief. They're not guaranteeing that it's not a replacement for aid yet. It's just too soon to have answers.
Okay.
They're still learning about it, and they'll be providing us updates.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I wanted to say that I don't think we need to form a committee, Lee. I think we have kind of a plan if this thing goes into the fall that we split the school sessions into 2. But right now, to do anything when we don't know, everything's a variable. I would just kind of sit back and kind of wait to see what the governor is going to do. All right. That's all.
So just before we finish the topic of distance learning on the agenda, what about some of the end of the school year typical activities such as graduation, et cetera? Are we starting to formulate some plans for that, or how are we looking to get ideas and suggestions?
I was going to do that under my report, but I can do it right now. We have met with, and Gail can add to this as well. Last Friday, we had a good meeting with a group of parents about our 2020 graduates, and Gail started a Google form for us where we're brainstorming lots of ideas, and the group is going to meet this Friday and be more concrete with what we want to do. Gail, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the ideas that came forward?
It's a real energetic group, super excited with some of the ideas that people have come up with. And it's just a matter of we need to find funding for some things. We know that we can't have a graduation, and so we want to make what would normally be their senior week a special week for them. Our biggest project that's already in the works is they already used M's during senior nights, and they had the M's propped up. And so the idea came that we had a whole bunch of those M's that were already made. We got a donation of plywood. We said if we make the M's a little bit smaller, they're easier to handle. We're going to put them in the middle of the field at Gaudet.
An M for every senior.
One for every senior. They'll decorate it. And Rosemary gave us the idea from one of her colleagues about we're going to call Friday Night Lights. The lights are going to go on at 8:20 because in military time, 2020 is 8:20. The lights will go on. The M's will be out there in the shape of an M. And it'll be kind of like our celebration of the seniors for the 3 weeks, hopefully 3 weeks leading up to that senior week. And then we have all kinds of ideas of once we get the caps and gowns, Mary Keller said that she would take pictures with their with their Zoom lens, and we'd have pictures of the seniors, and then we would create a Google slide that we could put on our website with everyone's permission, and have the seniors picture in their caps and gowns, where they're going, what their major is, a grab and go senior t-shirt. So there's a whole bunch of things that are swirling. We just need a little bit of funding, and we have a lot of people that are interested in making this special week. So we're pretty excited.
Yep. And we, as I said, we have another meeting this Friday with the group, and Gaudet is going to start working using the model the high school has used to start working on an 8th grade celebration as well. So, again, full community support. I've discussed some of this with Sean Brown, and he's all in on how the town can support this. So,
If just a thought, if we have the photos of the kids in their caps and gowns and some of that information, like a slide about each one of them, could we still hold a virtual graduation where some folks could still give an address, like a student could still give a speech, and
right. That's on
family members
yeah.
to log in. We could
Right.
kind of flash up each students one at a time, call their names still.
Yeah, there's all that's on the table, and actually we're going to have a meeting with the island principals and superintendents to kind of talk about what we're all thinking, so that we would have something similar at all 3 high schools on the island. And that's going to be probably next week. But yeah, everything from, the idea of the students are in the cars with their parents, they're in their caps and gowns, and we have a procession that goes through the town of Middletown, beeping horns, the police and fire escort, and people come out of their houses and celebrate our seniors. That's another idea that was thrown out there. So there's a lot out there. We have to figure out scholarship night, because that's a lot of money that we give out. So there's still a lot of planning to do. So
I have a question, Gail.
Yeah.
On the scholarship awards and everything, how are you coming on that? Is there anything I can do to help you? I've got several people who are give out scholarships, but they're not sure how to get a hold of anybody.
yeah, well, Ed, you can tell everybody to get a hold of me, and you have my email address. And once we get a plan together, we'll probably have a consolidation of all the checks. And if we can figure out a way to do it virtually or stream it somehow, so that you're actually announcing the names in real time, and people are watching it. So that would be kind of neat, because part of the surprise of scholarship night is learning that you've won something of value. And so
Right.
we kind of want to keep that same spirit going.
Okay, so in other words, the folks I'm thinking of they contacted me. They want to give out the scholarships, but they don't know. They need a list of students or students to apply. Do the students know where to apply?
Yes, so on our website, we have a whole scholarship area that students can apply. Guidance counselors have been in touch with the classes, with the senior class, encouraging them to apply for things. So the guidance, right, we're kind of doing scheduling now. We're gonna kind of move into figuring out that scholarship night. So as we get closer, I'll be in touch with you and let you know what you can tell the people that are interested in giving out money.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anything else on the distance learning piece? Other questions? Any other questions from anyone in the public? Raise your hand, enter it in the chat block. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we can move on to action items. Can I have, our first item is a resignation. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion that the school committee accept the resignation of Paul Kelly, bus monitor, effective March 27th, 2020.
Second.
Okay, Teresa made the motion, Lee seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, 5-0, thank you. And can I have a motion on the alternative grading plan for distance learning K-8 that we discussed?
I make a motion that the school committee approve the alternate grading plan for distant learning K-8.
Second.
Okay, Teresa made the motion, Lee seconded. Any further discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0 as well. Thank you, guys. All right, so now we just have superintendent's reports.
Yep. I'll just report on the recent personnel actions. You just received the resignation of Paul Kelly, bus monitor. A long-term sub for grade 6, Kelly Butella. She effective April 16th. And a transfer effective April 20th. Kim Calucci from district school administrative support personnel to the IT service help desk. So those were the personnel appointments that we made this time. Next is curriculum. I think we filled you in with the distance learning.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And next is finance.
Thank you. So I had provided an update on financial status of the operating budget. And this is, as I know you all recall, this is the time of year where finance directors become concerned because the end of the year is rapidly approaching and we're always worried about bringing this in on budget. We did put a freeze in some time ago now, right around the beginning of March, I believe. Prior to the executive order coming out, we had already put out a notice to our building and district leaders that all purchases were being reviewed one-on-one and needed to go through the approval path, and not everything was going. We were stopping those things that we believed we could hold off on at that point. Since that time, of course, we've had the expenses associated with COVID added to the budget. We do know there'll be some reimbursement. What's going to be reimbursed, we don't know yet. So we have a FEMA call on Friday that we'll be participating in, and hopefully they'll have more information at that time. What we do know is that whatever they do approve for reimbursement, A, it won't be everything, and B, they'll only approve at the 75% level. So for everything we've had to do, we are still assuming cost on that. That wasn't initially built into the operating budget. So again, trying to balance that as well. There are expenses that we still have. There are some that we expect will be reduced with, buildings not utilized at the same levels they are. Some of our 180-day contracts not moving forward in full. So we do expect to see some savings there. So we've gone through and created a listing of every open purchase order, both from an accounts payable perspective and a payroll perspective. And we're carefully reviewing each and every one of those to determine if there's anything there that isn't going to come in as materialized, or the purchase has been completed and there's some money that can be released on the purchase order. So we're looking through that, and hopefully that review will be completed soon. And as this new money becomes available and we learn what will be covered, what additional funding we may or may not have, that will help to bring the picture into give it some clarity. But we're a ways away from that at this point. Revenues, for the most part, our major sources of revenues all seem to be on target right now, including impact aid. That actually has seemed to move a little faster more recently. So I think the federal government is recognizing the situations out there. Some of our smaller revenues that we rely on, things like building and grounds rental, I expect to see some small shortfalls there. And Medicaid, we still have 4 months of reimbursements to go. And while I know there's still going to be Medicaid billing going on, I don't know that it would be at the same rate. So that's yet to be determined. But for the most part, the larger revenues we do expect to come in on target. So once we get more information on FEMA and we finish the review of all of the encumbrances and get a closer review on all of the purchases that are pending out there, we'll be able to give you an update moving forward. For the 21 budget, we did receive notice from RIDE that after the March data update, we were actually going to get an additional $89,000 in revenue, state aid for next year. So that was good news. That would bring us up to the 300,000 mark. However, I just have to caution you, and I'm sure you already know, we have no idea what that revenue is going to look like for next year. The notice came in after you approved the budget. So if and when we get it, it would be a budget adjustment that would be brought to you and to the council for approval. But it's highly unlikely, given the status of the state finances right now, that in fact we'll get the projected aid that we're looking for. It has to go all the way through the General Assembly process, and there are going to be a lot of competing interests out there this year. So we'll stay tuned for that and hope that that will come in, you know, as projected.
When do we typically get the money from the state? Is it in a couple lump sums, or is it spread out throughout the year?
For state aid, it comes in a payment schedule over the course of the year. So smaller payments in July and August, and then essentially the same amount every month for the remaining months of the year.
So if the General Assembly hasn't approved a budget as of July 1, do we not get any new money? We continue with whatever we received last year, or do you know what they would do?
I think they would do a minimum payment at that point. But even that minimum payment is really what we're getting right now. We don't know that we'll even get the same amount. It's really going to depend on what happens when the General Assembly approves the budget and when the governor and team look at the requirements on the new money or the restrictions on the new money, because there is some language always in there that can make it flexible, or can actually make it so that part of it could replace aid if needed. And that would be the worst case scenario, just a straight aid replacement for us, and leaving us at where we are.
Right, because that would mean we may get the additional money from the formula, but then we essentially wouldn't get any sort of stimulus money. It would be.
Right, and we may not get that formula money. And in fact, we could go backwards. Instead of even level funding the aid, it could be reduced somewhat. So it's really.
The first year we were supposed to get more. Don't they know that?
That's what I said. Not right.
All right.
So we'll continue looking at that. I also wanted to let you know that the school food services, the Grab and Grow program, is doing very well. All of the meals we're serving, we are getting federal reimbursement for them, so it's not additional cost to the district, but we are providing a service for families, and that's been well received, and the numbers continue to escalate.
We're in the 200 numbers, right, Cindy?
Yeah, we were at 243, and just yesterday it was 230 during the week, not even on a weekend. So I expect this week will be higher, this Friday. Okay. And we are doing the weekend meals now as well when we distribute on Friday.
Yeah, I've heard from from folks that have taken advantage of it and are really appreciative of the program, and even a lot that haven't, just say, you know, they're proud that we're able to offer something like that. So
absolutely, it's a help where help is needed, and that's what's important.
But lots of things up in the air, you know, just
very
with this everything COVID related, the bus contract, spring coaches, those types of things. So, you know, we take it one day at a time and get a little more information, and we move forward with it. So we'll keep you posted, though.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Cindy. Dave?
Sure, I'll just give a quick update. I still haven't heard back from RIDE whether they're going to extend the 5-year plans, but the last communication was it looks like they will. We postponed the bidding. We keep pushing it out for the HVAC project and the roof project for this summer, which is about almost $2 million. We're in the submittal review stage for the door projects, and that includes all the exterior doors at the high school and a lot of them at Gorday, plus some windows that were deferred in the previous project at Gorday. And staff are working hard refinishing floors, so it actually helps out with the low humidity and so forth when you're waxing the floors. They keep disinfecting areas of the building where people come into. And we're looking to do some LED lighting projects on the exterior of the buildings. We're not letting any contractors in the inside right now. So.
That makes sense.
Thanks, Dave. I just want to address, we have very few people coming into the building. Most of us are working from home. We do have teachers coming into the building on certain days and certain hours because they need to get their materials, especially the ones that are delivering materials to families, leaving the learning packet outside the door. Everybody comes in with masks and gloves, so it's very controlled. We did have parents request to come in and pick up students' musical instruments or gym clothing. As you recall, on that Friday, March 13th, we abruptly found out that there was no school the following week, and some of our students did collect their belongings from their lockers. Some of them didn't. So, we are getting requests. So our principals have been escorting them into the lockers with masks, with gloves, with wipes. So when they open the locker, there is, they're protected, as is the principal. And we've changed that since. And we will, if anyone requests things from student lockers, we'll go down and get those and do curbside. So perhaps our custodians could go down and get those, wearing masks and gloves, and deliver them curbside. So, as I said, we're adjusting as things evolve.
And is that only these things are like needed now? I guess I sort of could understand musical instruments if they're in a class and they need that to be able to practice or demonstrate. But some of the other stuff, if it's more, if it's not necessary truly right now, I mean, I guess I'd hope we'd encourage people to hold off until at some point when the restrictions are lifted, or we could organize a week or certain times for people to come and collect belongings. There may be families or students that don't want someone else go through their stuff,
Right.
Which, we could
I
argue about it, I guess.
understand that. I mean, just like our college students that are out there, they went on break and they were told they couldn't come back. So the colleges and universities have arranged specific times.
Right. Yep.
Them to come back and collect their things from the dorms.
Right, which I think we could do eventually. In the meantime, I would just suggest that we only focus on things that are urgently needed for something either education related or health.
Right. Some of those musical instruments are probably rentals that parents want to return, or that they need it for distance learning.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we're 5 weeks in. They should have picked that up by now. Yeah. I would think that they'd be picking that up by now.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But again, safety's always our #1 priority, and we've taken all the measures to ensure that safety.
Thank you. One question though, for Dave and or Cindy, I guess, on if we're going to be pushing out a couple projects because of this, is there any concern related to the bond funding and a timeline for that? Is there a timeline by which we needed to use that bond money, and are we in danger of exceeding it by any chance?
Yes, the timeline is June 30th of next year.
Okay.
And I just have one email communication from Dr. De Silva from RIDE, construction coordinator, the head of that department. He told me they're discussing it, but he did say that, we're here to support you and all the districts. So I think with this situation, I don't think they're going to shortchange that. But the projects that we'd have are the HVAC one and the roof one. And we'd be able to actually get those done after this summer if we have to, before June 30th. It's not the best way to do the projects. The roof one's an easy one. But if we had to, not to lose the reimbursement and so forth, we could do that.
Okay, so you're talking about the reimbursement from RIDE, but what about the town bond funding? Was there a timeline attached to any of that?
I believe what the one meeting that I went to, of course, they want you to use the money as soon as possible, but they were told a 5-year period at the time.
So that would be June of next year as well?
Yes.
I think all those timelines will be adjusted though, based on what the situation we're in.
Well, I hope so. I just would hate for us to lose any of that, you know, and lose the ability to do any of those projects. So just something I want to make sure we stay on top of and, you know, socialize with either John or it sounds like you're doing it with Ride, Dave. So thank you for that. But
I mean, some of the conversations we had with our, the superintendents and the governor, actually, if she were to keep the school, bringing contractors in and getting some of the projects done.
right.
So she had, you know, that was suggested and she seemed to approve something like that. Some of the districts that have major projects going on, additions,
Mhm.
and new schools. So
And projects that would be, that are made easier by not having lots of students in the building too. So, yep.
Yeah, and we're ready to go. We pushed out the date so far twice. So the next date, I believe it's the 13th of May. We would need some pre-bid appointments. And that would coincide to get the approval of those 2 projects at the next school committee meeting. So, I mean, if we have to push it out, we'll push it out another, 3 weeks. But the only thing that has stopped us right now is a public bid opening with the restriction on the number of people. So if the governor comes out later this week or next week and says, we're lifting that restriction to 10 people or, once we hit 10, I think we'd be great to have the public bid opening.
Okay.
Oh,
Thank you.
Kelly? Dave, have you heard from the building association? Because they seem to be working. And they have lots of their contractors. The same thing with bridge work or road works. So are you working with them to see what they're doing?
So the issue isn't getting the contractors to work. They want to work, and it's actually a great time for bidding because a lot of these contractors, some of them that have bid on previous projects, they've had to lay off staffing. So they're hungry. So, we have door projects that will be happening this summer regardless. But we stopped the interior work that we had going on with the LED lighting. So once we get the okay to be able to get back into the buildings and some of these restrictions are eased, we're ready to go with that.
If I can, I spoke with the state purchasing office about the public bid opening to see if they had made any accommodations for that during this time. And they have not. In fact, they said they've pushed out many of their bid openings. The only one they did allow to happen, which they needed to, was to retrofit spaces for hospitals. So short of that, they've pushed all theirs out. I shared with Dave that they also cautioned us because they were hearing from some contractors whose staff were not available due to COVID. And the state was concerned also that it could drive up pricing if there are limited contractors and less work going on, therefore driving up the cost of items. So Dave and I did discuss it, and he had pushed out the bid openings. He's done that a couple of times, and we're really just waiting for that opportunity. And hopefully the pricing will not escalate on us.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on facilities?
Nope, all set.
And okay, that's it. Can I have a motion to receive the superintendent's report?
So moved.
Second?
Teresa made the motion, Lee seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0. Let's see, is that it? I think that's it. Thank
I
you.
make a
all again.
motion. Are you ready to adjourn?
Thank you all for attending, both the folks in the school committee and the administration, as well as folks from the public who attended the meeting. Appreciate everybody's input and learning as we go. I think it went pretty smoothly. Hopefully we don't have to have too many more meetings this way, but we'll do it as long as we need to. Our next meeting date, do you have that handy?
I do, hold on. It's May 21st at 5:30.
May 21st, 5:30, same place. Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn at 7:01 PM.
Second?
Teresa made the motion, Lee seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
5-0. Thank you all. Have a great night.
So
Good
everyone.
night, everybody.
Thank you.